Today on The Art of Lifing with Keka, we are going to explore the topic of cultural appropriation. I had a friend tag me on a social media post the other day and said, I'm looking for all of my Indian friends and I have a question to ask. When you see Hollywood celebrities or stars wearing a sari or maybe wearing a bindi, which is the little decorative piece that people put on their foreheads, it's a traditional Indian symbol, do you feel like that's cultural appropriation? And so she asked her Indian friends to weigh in, and we had some conversations in there that really inspired me, and I felt like I wanted to share that here with you as well. So personally speaking, having been born in Canada but coming from Indian parents, I feel a little tickled pink when I see other people from other places and other cultures wearing a sari or putting on a bindi. I kind of feel like they're celebrating our culture, appreciating it and liking it, and I always think that that's a great thing. So when I look at my friends in our Indian community, typically if they're being asked that question, at least in my social circles, I don't get a lot of people that sort of feel very offended around cultural appropriation. And so when this question was asked on social media, I was thinking about this and I thought, you know, when we think that it's a celebratory thing, why is it that we might think it's a celebratory thing, but a lot of other cultures consider it to be cultural appropriation? And certainly within the Aboriginal communities, I know that there's a lot of sensitivity around that, and it's something that I've learned and wanted to find out, in the sense that I certainly don't want to be insensitive and misuse anybody's culture in any way. This got me thinking about the fact that, you know, at the end of the day, a core part of my belief is that we are all human and that different cultures from different places around the world can only make us richer. You know, I love traveling. I love going to different places around the world and experiencing people's culture. And if there's something that I could adopt from there in some way and enjoy that culture with them, so be it. Shouldn't that be a good thing? So philosophically, I think, yeah, that should be a good thing. But cultural appropriation and its sensitivity to me becomes very valid when we look at the historical context of how cultures have been misused or manipulated in some way or used for personal gain when the people of that culture haven't benefited. So for many indigenous communities in North America, what has been done through the process of colonization is something that I feel like we should all be hanging our heads in shame. You know, in many instances, so many of these members of the community weren't even allowed to practice their culture. It was decimated in some ways. So then if somebody else from a different culture comes in and says, hey, I want to practice your culture and do this, of course I can understand that sensitivity. You know, similarly, I recently came across the term blackfishing. Now, truth be told, I didn't know what that was when I first heard it, but I was at Branksome Hall. I was honored to be one of the judges at the World Debating Championships among their high school students and circuit. So there were teams, debating teams from around the world that had come and descended into Toronto, and some of these students were so eloquent. And so this one beautiful woman, so eloquent, she stood up on stage and she discussed blackfishing, which was the idea of non-Black people trying to act Black or trying to be Black. And she talked about beauty ideals and how, you know, when it comes to Kim Kardashian or some of our typical celebrities, whether they have a bigger booty or they have more plump lips, that people consider that to be a notion of beauty. But for so long, when Black women who naturally have that beauty came about, people in our just typical standards don't recognize that beauty in them. So there's such a hypocrisy there. And so in those types of situations, cultural appropriation becomes a very real thing. And I was thinking about this in the sense that, you know, if somebody wears a sari or wears a bindi, dances to Bollywood music, I think it's great. But you know, if a designer that was not South Asian came and put out a line of bindis that were, you know, designer brands charging an arm and a leg for it, if I saw that, I have to admit that it would kind of bother me, simply because I feel like, you know, somebody is capitalizing and commercializing an aspect of Indian culture that they don't necessarily own, and it's not necessarily benefiting this community. And truth be told, I'm not entirely fully clear on that logic, but instinctively I feel like that would make me uncomfortable. So here's the thing for me at the end of the day. There's been so much debate around cultural appropriation, and I think people treat it often as a black and white issue, but it's not. There's so many different gray shades in there that we need to be cognizant of. But there's three things that I think we should use when we look at embracing and appreciating other cultures. Number one, We need to be looking at the context, the historical context, the current cultural context of a particular climate and a particular group if we want to practice their culture. Is that appropriate for us to do? Number two, we have to educate ourselves. You know, when we look at the practice of yoga, it's become so commonplace today in Western cultures. And when I was growing up, my mom would use the term yogi to depict somebody who had dedicated their entire life to spiritual practice. Because what many Westerners may not realize is that the practice of yoga from India runs very, very deep. The actual physical components of yoga are just one small fraction of the depth of what the practice of yoga entails, but most people don't recognize that. So on Instagram or on certain, yoga studio websites, if they say I'm a yogi, I chuckle at that because I say, you don't know what that term means. Just because you know the physical practices of yoga doesn't make you a yogi. So just being sure to be educating yourself on the meanings of different cultural practices is really important. And last but not least, honor and respect. So anytime we take a particular cultural practice and we want to embrace it or practice a part of it, be a part of a cultural exchange, it's so important to approach it from respect. And when in doubt, ask. When I teach ethnic marketing, so many people in our C-suites and business get nervous and they say, I don't want to offend anybody, so I'd rather not talk about it at all. But none of us win when that happens. We lose out on the richness of cultures or from around the world. So at the end of the day, as a world traveler, I love to see other cultures. I think that it makes us richer because there's so much in our humanity that we can embrace and appreciate, but we have to know the historical context, we have to make sure we educate ourselves, and then we have to approach our cultures with honor and respect, and whenever in doubt, ask. And when you do that, you don't ever have to be afraid of embracing or appreciating someone else's culture. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed the content, then please like it and share it with anybody that you think might be interested in this content as well. I would also love it if you could subscribe to my channel. I put out new videos every Tuesday. And last but not least, if you have any comments, I would love to have a conversation with you. Let's do this journey together. Let's master the art of lifing and really do life on purpose.